They had maps of every star system known for millions of years. The archives of the Zaluth Empire stretched back to the birth of galactic civilization itself. They remembered when suns were still forming, when the stars were young, and when silence ruled the void. They had colonized systems older than Earth's moon. But Earth was always blank on their maps. The Zaluth never spoke of it, not openly. If the name came up in conversation, it was met with silence or a quiet shift in the room's atmosphere. Even the younger races who served under the Empire's vast rule knew better than to ask. Earth wasn't off-limits, it was unmentionable. Only one phrase ever made it through translation. The wound, that's what they called it. A scar in the cosmos, a wound in time. But humans didn't know any of that. To them, the stars were a new frontier, a place to expand, to reach, to dream. They had built ships, formed colonies on Mars, Europa, even a shaky alliance base on Titan. Earth was uniting in ways it never had before. And still, there was no alien contact, no grand arrival, no signals, nothing. Until the drone arrived. It didn't come with fire or noise. No grand entrance. It slipped past Saturn's rings unnoticed by all but a single observation satellite. Small, black, no heat signature. It hovered in Earth's orbit for exactly 6 hours, then disintegrated but not before transmitting one short message. A message in clean, structured binary. They are waking. We are not coming. Seal it, before it remembers. No one could make sense of it. They? Who were they? Seal what? What did it mean? Before it remembers. The United Council of Earth debated it for weeks. The message sparked panic in some corners of the government. Whispers began conspiracies that Earth had once been part of something much bigger. Something forgotten. Others believed it was a hoax, a cleverly designed prank. But the satellite data was real. The drone was real. Its disappearance left behind ion burns that scorched a clean, unexplainable hole in space-time for precisely 2.3 seconds. A month later, Mars base lost contact with its outer research colony. The images recovered showed something no one could explain. Not an explosion, not sabotage, just a field of bodies, faces frozen in terror, systems shut down from what appeared to be an energy burst from inside the station. But nothing on Mars had the power to do that. And the strangest part? No damage to the structure itself, as if the people had simply been turned off. The logs ended with one word typed over and over by the last man alive. It knows. It knows. It knows. Back on Earth, a man named Nolan worked in a deep Earth lab that wasn't officially listed in any global database. It was built under the Siberian shelf, funded by black-budget programs tracing back almost 80 years. Its purpose had shifted over time, first nuclear defense, then AI testing, then something else. For the last 5 years, they had been analyzing ancient magnetic anomalies, massive bursts of unknown energy captured in fossilized rocks. The patterns weren't natural. They were structured like signals, repeating, coded signals buried in stone, dating back 300 million years. Alien code, Nolan had joked once. Either that, or Earth's got a memory. No one laughed. That day, as he reviewed a new sample from deep beneath Greenland's melting ice, something strange happened. His tablet, disconnected from all networks, flickered, then shut off. Lights dimmed in the lab. His breath slowed, chest tightening. He wasn't sick. He wasn't panicking. He was being watched. No sound. No movement. But something ancient pressed against his thoughts. Not a voice. Not a presence. A recognition. Not from him to it, but from it to him. As if the planet knew him. And in that moment, somewhere in a star system far beyond human reach, the ancient Zaluth gathered in their crystal chambers. An elder looked up at a pulsar map and said in a language older than most stars, "The core stirs. The memory returns. Earth remembers." Another elder turned away, trembling. Then we are already too late. The power in the underground facility remained out for 27 minutes. During that time, no one inside spoke. No one moved. Most sat still, staring into space as though caught in some invisible trance. Some wept without understanding why. A few fainted. Nolan sat in his lab chair, sweat dripping down his spine, knuckles white as he gripped the edges of the metal table in front of him. When the lights flickered back, the hum of machines resumed. But something was different. Not in the air. Not in the systems. In them. In him. His colleague, Mara, walked in slowly, her voice shaky. You felt it too. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing, heart pounding, but not with fear. Not anymore. It was something deeper, stranger, like standing in a room you've never been in and yet knowing exactly where everything is. Familiarity without memory. She sat beside him, her hands trembling. It touched me, Nolan. I don't know how else to say it, but I felt the planet. I felt it watching me, like it knew my name before I was born. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the same thing reflected in her eyes that he felt in his bones. Recognition. Not of each other, but of something beyond them both. Something beneath them. It's awake, he whispered. Mara shook her head. No, not yet. It's waking. News of the blackout and the strange behavior of the lab staff didn't reach the surface media. The Siberian facility was far too protected, far too classified. But word traveled differently in the global black net, an untraceable channel used by hidden scientific communities, rogue thinkers, and what remained of Earth's true elite. A thread began appearing everywhere in those circles. The memory is coming back. Some dismissed it as conspiracy lunacy. Others, however, took it very seriously, especially the man known only as Dorian, a war analyst turned deep space tracker who'd worked with several off-world surveillance stations. He noticed a pattern no one else did. Across a span of 72 hours, 6 alien observation stations scattered across 3 different sectors of the galaxy went silent. These weren't aggressive facilities. They were listening posts, monitors. Each one of them had a single constant data focus: Earth. One by one, they went dark. No signals, no warnings, no signs of struggle. It was as if they'd simply been erased. Dorian had tracked alien movements long enough to know when a species was reacting out of fear. Not strategic withdrawal, not caution, but pure, instinctual terror. And the thing that disturbed him the most? None of the dominant alien races, not the Threxians, not the Yakur, not even the cold, distant Lithari had ever tried to approach Earth. They skirted Earth's system like it was radioactive. Their ships bent trajectories around Sol's orbit by obscene margins. They even placed cultural bans on talking about humans in formal gatherings. Some young races didn't even know Earth existed. It had been deliberately erased from galactic navigation systems. Why? He scrolled through classified threads as his fingers trembled over the keyboard. Then he found the phrase. The first war began on Earth. It was buried deep in ancient transcribed galactic mythology. Most dismissed it as a symbolic tale, a religious metaphor. But the language was exact, and the translation unnerving. Before the stars had order, before empires had names, they crawled from the dirt and taught fire to hunger. They were not made. They returned. Back beneath the Siberian shelf, Nolan stood at the magnetic resonance panel, staring at the latest scan. His voice was low. Something's under us. Mara turned from the console, raising an eyebrow. What kind of something? He didn't answer directly. He tapped on the monitor, bringing up an ultra-deep imaging feed. Hundreds of kilometers beneath the crust, in a chamber no drill had ever touched, lay something unnatural. Not a structure, not a creature, a shape. Too perfect to be natural. Hexagonal, rotating, vibrating at frequencies no Earth-born material could maintain. It's transmitting, Nolan whispered. Not to space, not to us, to itself. Mara leaned in, her breath catching. Or to others like it. He stared at her, cold sweat blooming across his forehead. What if there's more of them? You think there's a network under the surface? I think Earth isn't a planet. I think it's a prison. They both stood in silence, absorbing the weight of the theory. Something older than mankind, buried deep under their feet, sealed away, and now stirring. Far from Earth, on a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant in Sector K-89, a Zaluth Elder Council convened for the first time in centuries. The last time they had met in person, the universe had still believed in gods. Now they gathered again, not in worship but in fear. The eldest among them, Threnzul, his skin faded into translucent gray, spoke without words using telepathic pulses. The signal has echoed again. The chamber rippled with unease. It wakes. Another mind added. The seal weakens. They do not remember what Earth once was, but the core does. It calls to them. The planet remembers, and when it does, we will all forget what peace means. They fell into heavy silence. Then Threnzul made a decision none had expected. We must reach the humans first. Before the planet does. Shock rippled through the ancient minds. Contact with Earth is forbidden. Then let it be broken. I will go myself. I once knew the horror. I was there when they crawled from the ash and taught the stars how to scream. Nolan didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because of the dreams. Visions came like shards, jagged and vivid. Mountains of glass. Cities turned inside out. Skyless nights and moons split into three. Oceans that whispered names not in any language, yet every cell in his body understood them. He saw massive figures, not alien, not human, standing in rings of fire beneath the Earth's surface, eyes closed, dreaming together. He woke up gasping, skin cold, mouth dry. On his forearm, a symbol was burned into the skin. It hadn't been there before. It matched the one buried in the rock samples. Elsewhere, on the lunar military base, alarms began to sound. One of the outer satellites had detected a Zaluth transport vessel approaching Earth's system. This had never happened. No contact, no sightings. And now one of the oldest, most mysterious species in the known universe was heading straight toward Earth's orbit alone. The vessel didn't broadcast any signal. It didn't respond to hails. It simply moved with purpose, ignoring everything in its path. Earth's defense grid activated, but the higher-ups gave no order to engage. Everyone was watching, waiting, hoping the ship would stop. It didn't. It entered Earth's upper atmosphere at a trajectory that screamed crash, but right before contact, it vanished. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Back in the underground facility, the temperature dropped. Nolan and Mara stared at the scan again. The shape beneath the Earth had shifted slightly. It's moving, she said softly. He turned to her, eyes wide. No, not moving. Waking up. In the hours that followed, subtle things began to change across Earth. Birds flew in chaotic patterns. Magnetic fields pulsed out of rhythm. People began hearing low-frequency hums that no equipment could detect. Children spoke in languages no one had taught them. Old temples, untouched for centuries, began to vibrate, matching the frequency detected under Siberia. And all across the globe, those who had certain blood types, ***, those rare few born with strange birthmarks or unexplainable empathy disorders, *** began to feel drawn to one place. Siberia. Mara looked at Nolan, frightened but also strangely calm. We're going to be part of something huge. He didn't respond right away. Then he whispered, No. We're going to remember something that was meant to stay forgotten. Meanwhile, beneath the crust, the massive structure hummed louder. Not angry, not aggressive, just aware. For the first time in millions of years, Earth was remembering itself, and it was calling its children home. The snow fell heavier than usual over Siberia that morning, but the storm didn't feel natural. The flakes came in bursts, almost rhythmic, and there was no wind, just still, frozen air pressing against the surface of the Earth like a breath held too long. Inside the underground facility, Nolan stood in the command center, staring at the seismic scanner. The structure beneath the crust was no longer just vibrating. It was pulsing, expanding in timed intervals, like a heartbeat buried in stone. The scan showed concentric rings, slowly pushing outward, like shockwaves moving through Earth's mantle. If it kept growing at the same pace, it would intersect fault lines across Asia and possibly trigger tectonic shifts. But that wasn't the part that terrified him. It was that he could feel the pulses in his bones. Mara sat at the edge of her station, hands gripping her knees. "It's sinking with us," she said. "We're not watching it anymore. It's watching us. And not just from below, from inside." Nolan didn't want to say what he was thinking, but she said it for him. "It knows who we are." In the shadow of Earth's low-orbit defense station, a quiet meeting took place between 3 of Earth's highest-ranking Black Project officials. They had reviewed the intercepted Zal'uth vessel data. What they found disturbed them deeply. There was no weaponry on board, no cargo, no distress signal, but there was a single occupant, a dying, ancient being, so aged that its form was barely holding together. Its final act had been to inject a stream of encoded memories into Earth's gravity field, a signal compressed and quantum-locked into planetary mass. Whatever it was, Earth had absorbed it. The Council debated what it meant. Some believed it was a warning. Others thought it was an attempt to reawaken something ancient in the Earth's core. One of them, a pale woman named Director Vor, leaned over the table and said what no one wanted to hear. "What if Earth isn't just holding a secret? What if we are the secret?" They all fell silent. Vor continued, "Every other intelligent species in the galaxy avoids us. Not because we're dangerous, not because we're behind, but because we're remembering something they spent millions of years trying to forget." One of the men shook his head. "It's just a planet." Vor stared at him. "So is a time bomb." Elsewhere in the world, strange phenomena began to erupt. In Kenya, a crater once thought dormant emitted a tone that sent wildlife fleeing for miles. In Brazil, deep in the Amazon, a tribe that had never made contact with modern civilization began carving new symbols into ancient stone symbols that matched the same patterns from Siberia's magnetic scan. And in a small town in Canada, a 6-year-old girl began reciting equations describing dimensional folding math far beyond any Earth curriculum, but precisely aligned with lost Zal'uth archives. People were waking up to truths they had never studied, speaking languages no longer spoken. Some called it evolution. Others feared it was something worse, reactivation. Nolan and Mara watched global reports stream in on encrypted feeds. "It's not just geological," she said. "This thing buried under us, it's alive. And it's not waking up alone. It's waking us up with it." Nolan's eyes narrowed. "You think we're connected to it? I think we were part of it. A long time ago." That night, Nolan had another dream. But this one wasn't fragmented or vague. It was clear. Terrifyingly so. He stood in a city not made by humans. The sky above was thick with clouds that shimmered like silver. Towers spiraled upward, not built but grown. Everything around him pulsed with life, but not natural, life engineered. Life shaped by intention, directed, designed. People walked beside him, humans, but not quite. Taller, stronger, eyes glowing faintly. They spoke to one another in tones that carried both sound and thought. And above them all, far above, hung a black sphere suspended in the sky, radiating waves of force he could feel in his blood. He looked down and saw his hands. They were not his. They were older, stronger, tattooed with symbols that matched the ones in the stone from Siberia. And then he heard the voice, not from around him, but within. "You were the first. The experiment. The spark. But fire cannot be caged." He woke up, screaming. Mara ran into the room, her own face pale and soaked with sweat. "I saw it too," she said, voice shaking. "I was there. Before everything." They looked at each other in horror. It wasn't a shared dream. It was a recovered memory. From the far edges of known space, the Threxian ascendancy received the same gravitational pulse the Zalooth Elder had sent into Earth. They decoded what little they could. Most of their leaders dismissed it as religious nonsense. All except one. High Chancellor Drex saw the signs, read the old scriptures. The Zalooth had been the oldest race, yes, but they were also the most afraid. Their history was built around one moment: the War of the Waking Flame. A war that had never been recorded in detail, only hinted at. A war that wiped out entire species, erased worlds, and shattered alliances. And the origin of that war, according to the most forbidden texts, had begun on a small blue world in a system so unimportant no one had spoken its name in 1,000 generations. Earth. He summoned his generals and gave the order. Prepare the Omega Protocol. What target, Chancellor? One of them asked. He turned to the hologram of Earth, pulsing on his console. All of it. Back in Siberia, seismic readings began to spike. The structure under Earth's crust, what Nolan now believed was a kind of ancient intelligence core, was expanding again, this time faster. The pulses were now sending harmonic frequencies through Earth's ionosphere, subtly altering weather patterns and disrupting satellite feeds. More importantly, people around the world began to experience a phenomenon called ancestral surging, sudden, unexplained floods of memory, instinct, and language. Doctors couldn't explain it. Psychologists panicked. Governments tried to cover it up. But the people remembered, and the symbols started appearing everywhere. On skin, on walls, in soil, on children's drawings, symbols older than time, older than civilization. Mara ran a spectral analysis and found a match. They're coordinates, she said, pointing to the decoded symbols. Coordinates to what? Nolan asked. She looked him in the eye. To the original source, the seed buried in the planet's heart, a special ops unit, one of the best trained groups in Earth's black military program, was dispatched to dig into the Siberian anomaly. They carried advanced drilling and containment tech, radiation shielding, and non-lethal suppression weapons, just in case the civilians got too close. They made it halfway to the core chamber before the tunnel collapsed behind them. One by one, their cameras flickered out. No screams, no sign of struggle, just silence. Then, an audio signal returned, a child's voice, echoing. Welcome back. Elsewhere, the sealed alien libraries of the Zalooth trembled for the first time in thousands of years. Doors that had never opened creaked wide. Inside, glowing spheres rose from pedestals, casting ancient images into the air. The council gathered in terror. They saw the same dream Nolan had. The towers, the sky, the people of flame and memory, the sphere above it all. They saw the city fall. They saw the weapons that unmade reality. And then they saw Earth, quiet again, reseeded, reborn, reset. But some memories are too deep to kill. One elder collapsed to his knees. We didn't destroy them. We buried them, another whispered, and they're coming back. Nolan stood at the edge of the research dome, looking down into the dig site. The vibrations now resonated in his spine, his teeth, his skull. Everything in him felt like it was vibrating in harmony with the thing beneath. Mara joined him. We can't stop it. I know. Should we even try? He didn't answer. The truth was, a part of him didn't want to. The feeling inside him wasn't fear anymore. It was yearning, a strange desire to return, to remember, to become whatever he once was before this world forgot him. The final pulse that day knocked out power across 6 countries, and in the center of the dig site, a black monolith rose from the earth, humming with a song no one could understand but every soul felt. Not new, not alien, just familiar. The monolith stood in absolute silence at the bottom of the dig site, surrounded by thick clouds of dust and vapor. Its surface was black, not black like obsidian or coal, but the absence of light itself. Eyes couldn't focus on it for too long without pain, and cameras showed only a static blur, as though the image refused to be captured. No one dared to touch it, not at first. The excavation team had cleared back, forming a perimeter. The air near the monolith felt thick, almost gelatinous. It wasn't heat, not magnetism either. It was something else. Presence, pressure, intelligence. Mara stood 10 feet from the thing, arms wrapped tightly around her chest. She could hear it, not with her ears but with something older inside her, like memories that didn't belong to her were brushing against her mind. Curious, reaching. Nolan stepped closer. "It's not a weapon," he said. "It's a key." She looked at him, eyes wide. "To what?" "To us." High above Earth's orbit, deep within a stealth satellite hidden in the black, a small team of intelligence monitors watched helplessly as encrypted footage streamed in from the Siberian lab. The monolith's emergence had triggered dormant protocols, many of which had been written decades ago by people who were no longer alive. But those protocols came with warnings. Ancient warnings. One monitor leaned over and read the old directives aloud. Project Edenfall, Tier 10. Classified, beyond human clearance. If the primary core awakens, Earth is no longer safe for containment. Immediate exodus or termination required. He looked at his commanding officer. "What the hell is Edenfall?" The commander whispered. "The story we buried before history began." Around the globe, strange awakenings escalated. In Tokyo, a woman collapsed in a subway, speaking a fluid language never recorded before. When linguists finally translated parts of it, they discovered commands, military orders meant for soldiers that shouldn't exist. In Istanbul, an elderly man, blind since birth, began painting detailed maps of subterranean structures beneath the Earth's crust. Structures that matched recent scans from Siberia. In Peru, a cave, long thought sealed by natural rock, burst open. Inside were markings identical to the monolith. The stone carvings dated back over 10,000 years before the first known civilization. All signs pointed to a single truth. Humanity didn't evolve. Humanity was reactivated. Nolan stood in front of the monolith again that evening. The sun had long set above ground, but down here, near the Earth's belly, it was always dusk. He couldn't stop shaking, not from cold, from recognition. "It's talking to me," he whispered. Mara stood at his side. "It's not words, is it?" "No," he said. "It's older than language. It's like thought without form, memory without edges. I don't just feel it, I remember it." He stepped closer. The air grew thicker, but not hostile, almost inviting. "She said we were the first," he continued. "Who?" Nolan looked at her, eyes unfocused, voice distant. The voice in the dream, the one above the towers, the one inside the black sphere. "She said we were born here, but meant for something else." Mara's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" Nolan placed his hand on the monolith. The world around him vanished. He stood in darkness, not metaphorical darkness, but primordial void, before sound, before stars. In front of him stood 7 figures, tall and featureless. Their forms shimmered between human and something else. Their eyes were white flames. They spoke not in words, but in pure emotion. "You were the trial. The flame inside the shell. We gave you Earth, not as a gift, as a tomb. You burned the stars. You tore the sky. You unmade what could never be rebuilt. We buried you in flesh, covered your names in dust, made you forget so the stars could heal. But memory is gravity. It always returns. And now you're waking." Nolan tried to speak, but he had no mouth here, no voice. "When the last seal breaks, you will remember what you are, and then we will all burn again. This planet is not your home. It is your prison." The void vanished. He gasped awake on the ground, blood dripping from his nose. Mara knelt beside him, shaking him. "What happened?" He stared at her with wide, horrified eyes. "We're not human." At that moment, across the galaxy, ships began to move. The Threxian fleet had crossed the outer rim, ignoring treaties and galactic laws. Their mission was clear: contain Earth, destroy the core, prevent the reawakening. But they were too late. Deep within Earth, beneath tectonic layers untouched since the formation of continents, something cracked. A seal made not of stone, but of quantum-locked matter, shattered. No explosion, no tremor. Just a whisper through time. And the signal that followed was heard in every advanced system across the stars. A single pulse. A single message. We remember. Panic struck the Zalluth Council. Their elders, the very architects of silence, stood frozen. The memory has surfaced, one said. The sleepers are stirring. Another choked on the words. The human core is awake. The one called Threnzul, older than any of them, spoke with finality. The war is coming again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the stars. It was coming from Earth. In the facility, Mara stared at Nolan. He looked the same, but he wasn't. His voice was slower, deeper. His eyes shimmered faintly. "You saw it," she said. He nodded. "I didn't just see it. I was part of it. I was there when the towers fell, when the stars turned against us." Mara shook her head. "This can't be real." "It is," he said. "We were something else. Before the bones. Before the blood. Before they put us in flesh. And now?" He looked up at the monolith. "Now. We're remembering why they locked us away." Outside, across the Siberian sky, strange lights began to form. Not auroras. Symbols. Massive glyphs that shimmered in the air, seen even from orbit. A language of light and memory. A beacon. The Earth had turned itself into a signal tower. And it was broadcasting not to the galaxy, but to what lay beneath. In a secret command center beneath Antarctica, one of Earth's oldest hidden installations, predating the Cold War by centuries, came alive. Systems long dormant reactivated. Old cryochambers thawed. Screens flickered. A voice rang out over the intercom in perfect English, despite being last recorded in 1824. Protocol Genesis initiated. "Welcome back, Wardens." Inside the chambers, figures opened their eyes. Men and women frozen for centuries, not because they were dangerous, but because they were keys. Each of them carried a shard of what Earth had once been, and now they were needed again. Mara stood with Nolan at the edge of the monolith chamber. Around them, scientists and soldiers alike had stopped resisting. Some knelt, some wept, others simply watched, silent and still, as the structure began to rise slowly, impossibly lifting itself without touching the rock, hovering inches above the Earth. Beneath it, a stairway revealed itself. Not made of stone, not metal. Memory. Mara whispered. "It's inviting us in," Nolan said. "No, it's welcoming us back." They stepped forward, and the world they knew began to vanish behind them. The steps beneath the monolith didn't feel solid under their feet. They weren't made of any material Nolan or Mara could identify. With each step downward, the walls shifted smooth at first, then transparent, revealing flashes of something else. It wasn't memory. It wasn't dream. It was like the Earth itself was showing them its secrets in whispers and fragments. The corridor went on longer than physics allowed, twisting into angles that shouldn't exist. Mara counted her footsteps at first. Then she lost track. Not because of distraction, but because time stopped behaving. Gravity wasn't constant. Sometimes she felt heavier, sometimes almost weightless. Her breath fogged in one direction, then another. Yet she never felt dizzy or disoriented. If anything, she felt guided. After what felt like hours and seconds all at once, the steps ended. A vast chamber opened before them, the ceiling so high it disappeared into pitch black. The floor glowed faintly beneath their feet, humming with a resonance that filled their bodies more than their ears. At the center stood a sphere, floating just above a triangular pedestal. It looked like black glass filled with stars, but stars that moved wrong, bending and spiraling into geometries that didn't belong in this universe. Mara stopped walking. She could feel herself in that sphere. Her skin prickled. Her pulse slowed. There was something inside her that responded to the hum of this place. Nolan stepped closer. "This is the core," she nodded, eyes wide. "This is where it began, far above, in low orbit. The first wave of Threxian destroyers reached Earth's edge. No resistance met them. No weapons fired. Earth's defense grid had gone completely silent. The Threxians weren't surprised. They expected a primitive race barely aware of interstellar threats. They believed the human silence was fear. But then their sensors started failing. One by one, systems shut down radar, propulsion, comms. They tried to reboot. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't sabotage. It was rejection. As if Earth itself refused their presence. And then, from below the planet's crust, a signal pulsed outward. Not a weapon. A reminder. Inside the core chamber, Nolan's breathing slowed as he approached the floating sphere. Images flashed in his mind. Not memories. Fragments of truth. He saw humans, but not as they were now. No skin, no blood. Pure energy wrapped in temporary shells. Travelers who had arrived before time had meaning. They didn't evolve here. They fell here after they lost the war. After they burned the stars and unmade galaxies. After the other ancient species like the Zal-Uth locked them away. Nolan gripped the edge of the pedestal, panting. "We're not children of Earth," he said through clenched teeth. "We're prisoners in it." Mara fell to her knees, staring at the sphere. "And the planet? It's not our home. It's our cage." "No," Nolan said. "It's our warden." Suddenly, the sphere shimmered and spoke. Not aloud, not through sound, but through feeling. It filled the chamber like thunder trapped in a heartbeat. "You are the last flame. You are the fire before the fall. What you were cannot be allowed to return. But the universe forgets. The stars forget. And so do you. You were sealed not for what you did, but for what you are. But now you remember. And remembering is the first step toward awakening." In Antarctica, the revived wardens stood around a glowing platform. Their eyes reflected light that wasn't present. Some of them were ancient warriors, sleepers, from the time of Earth's first seeding. Others were scientists from ages past. One woman, with silver hair and a jagged scar running down her cheek, whispered to the others, "The gate is opening." Another warden stepped forward and placed her hand on the platform. A map unfolded, a global projection with 7 glowing points. One had already activated. Siberia. The others pulsed softly, waiting. If all 7 cores awaken, the seal will break, and they will become what they were before the fall. Back in the core chamber, Nolan took a breath. The air was dense, alive. "We were gods once," he whispered. Mara stepped toward him. "No, not gods. Something worse." The sphere flashed. "You were flame-given thought. You were hunger made conscious. You did not build. You consumed. You shaped galaxies into weapons and made suns scream. And when the others could not kill you, they buried you. You are not Earth's creation. You are its infection." Mara looked away, trembling, but Nolan didn't flinch. "Then why wake us?" he asked. Silence. Then, because something darker comes, and only fire can fight fire. In deep space, far beyond the rim, sensors across multiple systems lit up with signals from the null vector, a region thought to be completely lifeless. A gravity well formed at its edge, devouring star matter at exponential rates. A new kind of signal was detected within it. Not organic, not artificial, something in between. The original enemy. The thing the humans once fought and failed to destroy. It had returned, and Earth had always been the key. Not just the cage for humanity's past, but the only lock against what lay beyond. Mara backed away from the sphere. "We're not ready," she whispered. "We're barely even evolved. We're a broken species, war, greed, corruption. Asterisk." "These were always symptoms," the sphere replied. "Of what lies beneath your flesh. You are more than this body. You are what the universe learned to fear." Nolan closed his eyes. He could feel it now, the armor beneath the skin, the power latent in his blood, the echo of a history buried so deep it had become instinct. They weren't flawed, they were capped, sealed, held back by design. Until now, in orbit, the Threxians panicked. Their ships, paralyzed, their weapons, offline. A surge of light burst from the Earth, blinding, and from the surface, one by one, 7 ancient towers broke free from the crust, emerging from continents across the globe, silent, sleek, humming with power. Earth wasn't just a cage. It was a reactivating war engine. Inside the core, the sphere pulsed again. The first flame has been lit. The others will awaken. The war will come again. But this time, you may choose to become what you once were, or to forge something new. Mara stepped back. Nolan looked into the sphere, and he chose. He placed both hands on the glassy surface. The chamber exploded with light. Back on the surface, the monolith shattered. But not in destruction, in transformation. Its shards rose into the air, spiraled, then vanished into energy. And Nolan walked out. But he was no longer entirely Nolan. His body shimmered. His eyes burned gold. His voice, when he spoke, was like a choir whispering in unison. "The seal is broken," he said, and the world listened. The wind howled across the Siberian plains, unnatural and sharp, as if the earth itself had begun to exhale for the first time in ages. Where the monolith once stood, there was now a jagged crater, glassy at the edges, humming faintly. Around it, the snow had melted in perfect concentric rings. Heat radiated upward, yet there were no flames, no smoke, just silence, thick and watching. And from that silence, he emerged. Nolan wasn't just walking. He glided across the ground, as though gravity bent to accommodate his steps. His eyes no longer held the dull blue of before. They were molten gold, shifting like solar storms. His skin shimmered faintly beneath his clothes, almost translucent in places, revealing veins glowing with pale white light. Every breath he took seemed to pull power from the very air around him. He looked up to the sky, not as a man admiring the stars, but as someone who remembered what lay beyond them. Mara stood at the edge of the crater, shaking. She had followed him out, but barely. Something inside her was breaking, splitting along ancient fault lines. She could feel it in her chest, a burning, heavy pressure like a second heartbeat waking up. "Nolan," she whispered. He turned slowly, like he already knew she was there. "You feel it too," he said, his voice layered, part human, part something older. "I don't want to," she whispered. "You don't have a choice," he replied. "None of us do. The seals are failing. The others will awaken soon." Across the world, the second tower rose, this time beneath the sands of the Namib Desert. It broke through rock and time, rising in perfect symmetry, humming with ancient frequencies. The energy it emitted shut down nearby satellites, cracked old bedrock, and lit the sky with symbols only a few could understand. The old ones, those with the dormant blood, began to stir. Some of them screamed. Some fainted. Others began speaking in voices they didn't recognize as their own. The world governments couldn't control the narrative anymore. Satellite footage leaked. Footage of impossible geometry emerging from deep Earth. Rumors flew through the networks, alien contact, divine prophecy, apocalypse theories, but none came close to the truth. Because the truth was worse. Humanity had not been evolving. It had been suppressing its true nature. And now, that nature was returning. In a classified chamber beneath a mountain in Switzerland, the Global Emergency Council convened. Military leaders, shadow diplomats, black-budget scientists. None of them had answers. Only fear. 2 towers in less than 24 hours, someone said. "That's not a coincidence. It's a countdown," replied another. A third voice, older, gravelly, cold. "They're waking up." A tense silence followed. General Krychek, head of orbital defense, stood. "We've got 35 Threxian destroyers parked outside our orbit. They're not attacking yet. I think they're waiting to see what happens." One of the advisors leaned forward, waiting to see if the thing they feared the most is really returning. No one said it out loud, but they all thought it. The thing they sealed, the thing they called humanity. Meanwhile, in the ruins of an ancient Zaluth outpost buried beneath the Pacific Ocean Trench, an ancient archive flickered to life, triggered by the energy waves pulsing from Earth's crust, holograms of dying stars, galaxies consumed, planets folded in half by weapons that used thought as ammunition, and in the center of the archive, a single species catalogued as Class 0 extinction priority. Not the Threxians, not the Lithari, not even the Voidborn. The species was labeled in the Zal-Uth tongue, a language never spoken aloud for fear of reawakening the memory. Origin: Terra. Third planet. Sol system. Genetic type: Adaptive Atomic Resonance Core, AARC. Designation: Forbidden. Status: Quarantined. Sealed. Monitored. Known aliases: the Forgotten Flame, the Sleepers, the Devourers, Humanity. Nolan walked through the snowy ridge above the facility, moving slowly, as if remembering how to use the human body he now wore like armor. Mara followed behind, her legs weak. Her mind felt too full, filled with languages, equations, names she never learned but somehow knew. Her memories weren't just her own anymore. She saw lives that weren't hers, battles she'd never fought, worlds she'd never touched. And always, in those memories, she saw him, Nolan, leading, fighting, burning across the stars like a vengeful god. "What are we?" she asked. He stopped. He looked out across the icy plain. "We were the universe's first mistake," he said, "and maybe its last hope." 1,000 kilometers above, the Threxian fleet made its decision. They initiated a planetary lockdown. Ships formed a ring around Earth's orbit, aiming their weapons at the surface. But they weren't prepared for what Earth had become. The planet itself had changed, no longer dormant, no longer passive. The towers now functioned like planetary veins, pumping invisible energy through the crust, into the core, and back out in pulses. The moment the Threxians locked targeting systems, Earth responded, not with missiles, not with force, with memory. A pulse of information erupted from the planet, hitting every ship in orbit. And in an instant, every Threxian aboard remembered something they never experienced: the war. The destruction. The original form of humanity. The fall of their worlds. The screams of ancestors long dead. Thousands of soldiers collapsed in their ships, weeping, convulsing, or simply fading. Because you can't kill fire with armor. You have to forget it. And Earth had just reminded them what burned before. Mara collapsed onto her knees in the snow, clutching her chest. Her skin glowed faintly beneath her coat. She could feel it now. Not just the knowledge, the power. It was coming back. "Nolan," she gasped. "I don't want this." He knelt beside her. "You never had a choice," he said gently. "None of us did. We were made for war, forged in chaos. They locked us in bone and silence, thinking it would hold us." She looked into his eyes. "But it didn't." He nodded. "No. And now they're afraid again." In orbit, 3 Threxian ships began to retreat. Their captains sent panicked messages back to the Ascendancy, coded warnings not to approach. But the High Command didn't listen. They deployed the Nullfire, a weapon designed to erase planetary memory, shattering psychic fields and cutting off conscious resonance. It was meant to erase awakening. But when the beam hit Earth, it reflected, as if Earth itself had eyes now. And in retaliation, the third tower rose, this time beneath the Himalayas. A burst of energy cracked the sky open for a full 60 seconds. People as far as Delhi fell to the ground, their bodies seized by visions of pre-time, where machines obeyed thoughts, where voices commanded the fabric of physics, and humanity ruled not through peace, but through absolute force. That evening, Nolan and Mara returned to the surface entrance of the facility. Everything was abandoned. The soldiers had fled. The scientists were gone. Only silence remained. Mara walked beside Nolan, still dazed. "What happens now?" He looked up, eyes glowing brighter. "The other cores will awaken. 4 more. Each one holds a different piece of what we were, what we could still become. She swallowed hard. What if we don't want to become that? He didn't answer, because deep down, they both knew it had already begun. The world was changing, and it wasn't gradual anymore. By the time the fourth tower rose, this one from the depths of the Mariana Trench, Earth's crust was no longer the dominant authority. The tower didn't break through violently. It phased into reality, as though it had always been there, simply waiting for the right vibration to reappear. When it did, the oceans around it calmed unnaturally. Tidal patterns halted. The wind stopped. For a full 5 minutes, the Pacific became a mirror. Ships froze mid-wave. Whales rose silently, as if paying homage. And from the tower came light, not blinding but deep and resonant, a color no human language could name. Every sensor on Earth picked it up. Every sleeping mind twitched. Every awakened, those like Nolan, Mara, and others around the world felt it as a pulse through their veins. Like something inside them nodded. Like something inside them said, 4. The foundation holds. Nolan sat in the Siberian facility, now converted into a staging site. He was no longer being watched by scientists or guarded by soldiers. Those who had resisted had fled. Those who had stayed were changing. Around him, a few dozen others had arrived over the last 48 hours, drawn to the towers by instinct, not invitation. A man from the Philippines who'd survived a lightning strike and had begun hearing voices in equations. A blind girl from Nigeria who could now speak fluent Zuluth dialect, an extinct tongue buried in alien ruins. A former miner from Chile whose bones glowed in darkness, veins humming like conduits. They didn't need introductions. They recognized one another, like family reuniting after lifetimes apart. Mara stood at the edge of the group, arms folded, still not fully accepting what she was becoming. She didn't trust this. Not yet. She'd spent years believing in science, in structure, in logic, and now that logic was whispering to her in ancient war codes and memories of galaxies on fire. I still don't think we're meant to be this, she said quietly, as Nolan approached her. He didn't argue. Meant to be, or designed to be, he said softly. Maybe there's no difference anymore. In orbit, the remaining Threxian ships had gone dark. Not destroyed, not disabled, but silent. The pulse from the fourth tower had done something worse than kill them. It had rewritten their memories. Their systems still functioned. Their crews were still alive. But none of them remembered who they were, why they came, or what species they belonged to. Their databases were filled with symbols now, their minds blank. The Ascendancy, watching from light years away, realized the truth. The towers aren't weapons. They're mirrors. They force everything around them to reflect what lies beneath. And for some, what lay beneath was too much. At the Switzerland Warden facility, an ancient debate was unfolding. The Wardens had been guardians, not of Earth, but of the Seal. Their job had never been to protect humans. It had been to protect the galaxy from humans. And now, the Seal was failing. There are only 3 towers left, said one of them, a pale man with sharp eyes and cracked lips. When the 7th rises, the core will merge. The full consciousness will awaken. The woman with the silver hair looked at him. Then we pray Earth has learned mercy in its sleep. But none of them believed that, because mercy had never been in Earth's design. Back in Siberia, Nolan stood before the console linked to the monolith chamber's foundation. Though the monolith had shattered, its base remained active, functioning now like a nexus. A map hovered in the air, 7 glowing points, each tower flickering with different pulses. He could feel the rhythm in his chest. They're speaking, he said aloud, and some of the others nodded. To each other. The towers aren't just structures, they're neural nodes. You mean like a brain? Someone asked. He nodded. Earth is forming a mind, its original mind, and we're inside it. Mara approached cautiously. But why now? What's changed? Nolan's eyes narrowed. Because something else is waking up too. Something even the old ones feared. Beyond the edges of the galaxy, Hidden within the folds of the null vector, a mass stirred. It had no shape, no color, no soul. It was what came before stars, before light, before life. The ancient enemy of the flame, not a species, not a god, a force, the anti-thought, the unmaking, the very thing humanity had once tried to fight and failed. And now, that thing had sensed the seal weakening. It was coming, and Earth wasn't ready. Tower 5 rose from beneath the Greenland ice sheet, cracking centuries of frozen land in moments. As it emerged, weather across the globe destabilized but not randomly. Systems shifted in patterns. Cyclones spiraled in sequences matching human DNA strands. Lightning storms blinked like ancient code. The sky was no longer weather. It was language, and every human being with even a trace of the old blood began to feel it. Some cried, some raged, some transformed. Not physically, mentally, they began to remember. A man named Kellen stood in the ruins of a collapsed temple in Morocco, staring at the symbols now glowing beneath the stones. He'd been a schoolteacher 2 weeks ago. Now he could read a language that no one had spoken in 10 million years. He turned to the archaeologist beside him, eyes wide, voice low. "We didn't build temples to gods," he said. "We built temples to ourselves." Mara watched Nolan from a distance. He was changing faster now. His skin pulsed with faint waves of energy, like light trying to escape. She still looked human, but her dreams weren't human anymore. Last night, she'd seen herself commanding a fleet made of memory, flying across oceans of sound, not space. Her orders had once decided the fate of suns. Her voice alone had silenced stars. And now she woke up in cold sweat, terrified of what she was capable of. She approached Nolan. "When the 7th tower rises," she asked, "what happens to us?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, we stop being human." In an abandoned observatory in Argentina, the sky cracked open. Tower 6. Beneath the Andes, the ground rose and split, revealing the tallest of the structures yet. It pulsed a crimson hue, and with it came a new effect: gravity distortion. Time lagged across regions. Radios replayed words seconds before they were spoken. Insects moved in reverse. Entire cities experienced memory bleed, people remembering events that hadn't happened yet. It wasn't chaos. It was recalibration. And somewhere, deep in the Earth's mantle, the final lock stirred. Beneath Africa, far below the Kalahari Basin, the 7th Corps awaited its moment. It pulsed once every 30 minutes. Each time, it grew louder, brighter, more alive. It was the heart of what humanity had once been. And when it rose, the final part of the seal would break, and Earth would awaken as it was always meant to be. That night, Nolan stood on the ice ridge again, looking toward the stars. "They'll come soon," he said. Mara stepped beside him. "The galaxy?" she asked. He nodded. "And the thing beyond it?" She looked at him, voice cracking. "Do we become monsters?" He turned to her, softly. "We already were. But maybe this time we don't have to be." The ground shook beneath the Kalahari, as if the Earth itself had begun to exhale. Animals fled long before the tremors started. Birds circled once, then vanished. Even the wind went still. A silence gripped the desert, not the kind that comes from stillness, but the kind that follows the death of sound itself. Then, without warning, a column of dark gold light erupted from the sand, tearing upward into the sky like a blade piercing the heavens. The 7th tower had awakened. Across the globe, people dropped to their knees without understanding why. Not in pain, not in worship, but in response to a signal too old to ignore. The 7 towers pulsed in unison, harmonizing across the planet's crust. Energy lines, ancient ley paths forgotten by modern science, lit up like fire veins beneath cities, forests, oceans. Earth wasn't just alive, it had remembered its design. In the Siberian facility, now overflowing with hundreds of awakened, Nolan stood at the center of the Nexus chamber. The 7 tower icons on the holographic map no longer blinked. They now burned with a steady, united flame. Around him, the awakened stared silently, none of them speaking, yet all of them aware of the same truth. This was the convergence, not of power, not of nations, of identity. Earth, for the first time in eons, was not suppressing what it held inside. It was broadcasting it. Mara sat on the edge of the observation platform. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from vibration. Every molecule in her body felt too fast, too dense. She could hear the tower's pulse in her bones. She didn't need devices to understand their language anymore. She was the device now. "Nolan," she whispered. He turned, slowly. His eyes weren't just glowing anymore. They were mirrors. If you stared long enough, you could see galaxies in them. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she said. He walked toward her, the others parting around him like a tide. "You don't have to be strong," he said. "You just have to stop lying to yourself." She looked up, breathing hard. "About what?" "That you were ever human to begin with." Far above Earth, in the black vacuum of orbit, the remaining Threxian fleet broke formation. Some ships had already retreated. Others lingered, hesitant, scanning for signs of traditional warfare. But there were none. No missiles, no beams, no kinetic force, only light. From 7 points across the Earth, streams of light spiraled upward, arching, twisting, converging in orbit. They didn't strike the ships. They passed through them. And when they did, every species aboard those ships, Threxian, Lithari, and even neutral observers, saw the same thing at once. A memory, a war, a world burning white, not from destruction, but from sheer force of thought, a voice echoing across the stars, not made of sound but command. "You tried to unmake us. You buried us in silence. You wrapped us in weakness and called it peace. But we are not the flame you feared. We are what comes after." In a secure underground council chamber in Geneva, Earth's last unified leadership sat paralyzed, screens filled with unreadable data. Radar arrays showed nothing. Communication relays blinked, but no one could understand what they transmitted anymore. They weren't being jammed. They were being left behind. A single word flashed on every terminal, regardless of language. "Awakening." And then the power went out. Not from failure, from choice. In the Warden facility beneath Antarctica, the last remaining elders gathered around the crystalline altar, the final failsafe forged millions of years ago by the Galactic elders to destroy Earth if it ever reawakened. One by one, they placed their hands on the control slab, and one by one, their minds were burned clean. The failsafe had been disarmed, not by sabotage, not by override, but by Earth refusing to let them act. "You never had authority," one of the wardens murmured as she crumbled to her knees. She looked up at the ceiling, frost forming on her skin. "We were just babysitters." Atop the 7th tower, somewhere in the deserts of Botswana, the air shimmered. Nolan appeared in a shimmer of fractured light, not through teleportation, but displacement. Reality shifted around him now. Mara stood beside him, her hair flowing upward as though gravity no longer knew what to do with her. All around them, the land had gone still. Time bent in the light. A lion stood frozen mid-stride. Dust hung in midair like ash paused in grief. The other awakened appeared in flashes, not beaming in, phasing back into alignment. Each one of them looked different now. Not monstrous, not divine, simply real. As if everything else had been a mask. In the sky above them, where the converged beams met, a shape began to form. A sphere, not of metal or stone, of memory. It pulsed, not in light, but in understanding. The original flame, the true consciousness of Earth, once fragmented and locked in the 7 nodes, now whole. And inside it, the blueprint of what humanity once was before the fall. Mara looked up, tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful." Nolan's voice came not from his mouth, but from within the minds of everyone present. "It's not finished." From the edge of the galaxy, something arrived. Not in ships, not in form, the unmaking. It crept into star systems like rot, bending light, devouring time. Planets it touched collapsed into themselves. erased not just from space but from memory. And now it had found Earth again. The galaxy watched, silent and helpless, because they had used everything to stop it before, and failed. Only the flame had held it back, and that flame was Earth. Or rather, what lay within Earth. The sphere above the seventh tower brightened as the darkness approached. Its glow was not defense, it was invitation. The awakened raised their hands, and from their bodies, energy lifted, not magic, not science, but something older, will, unity, purpose. The convergence completed, and for the first time in 10 million years, Earth remembered. It spoke, not in language, but in a wave that passed through matter itself. Every creature on Earth, every tree, every rock, every drop of water all trembled in its echo. You feared what we were, but you never understood what we chose to become. We were fire. We became light. Now we are memory, and memory cannot be unmade. The unmaking reached Earth's orbit. It began to stretch, unraveling the fabric of physics around the planet's edge. But then the sphere pulsed once more, not in violence, in truth, and the unmaking halted, because it remembered what it had once failed to destroy. And then it tried to flee, but memory binds, and the Earth did not forget. The sphere exploded silently into a wave of understanding, stretching across space faster than light, reaching every species, every mind, every atom. And in that moment, the unmaking stopped. Not because it was killed, but because it was understood, and things that are understood cannot stay monsters. They become part of the story. The light faded, the towers went still, Earth sighed, and the awakened looked at one another, still glowing faintly. Nolan turned to Mara. He looked human again, almost. You feel it? He asked. She nodded. It's quieter now. He smiled. Because we're not remembering anymore. She stared at him. We're writing now? He nodded. Welcome to Chapter 1.